Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Again, without wasting the precious time of the listeners, we straight away jump to our topic in this episode of ideology, and that is going to be, we're going to check the efficacy of democracy in the COVID crisis. The basic purpose of this topic and all of this episode of ideology is we increase our productivity, and if we are doing mistakes in any of our ideologies, we have to recover from that and move forward. We have made certain technological advancements in today's world, and we need to really move forward. And we believe that democracy is something that is very outdated. So what really happened during the COVID crisis was that there was a lack of skill and expertise by the governmental leaders to handle this situation. Initially, they did not know how to cope up with the situation, how to comprehend this new virus crisis, which is basically a field of epidemiology, and viruses and such kind of crisis probably exists only in maybe 100 of years. So it was very difficult for the heads of the states to understand this thing very wisely. Secondly, there were political interests which are very clear in the democratic system, and that are the part and parcel of the democracy. So we were not expecting anything very fruitful from the political leaders. There were parties which were fighting with each other of the policy making and blaming each other for the lack. And obviously lockdowns and curfews, and they were not very popular decisions for the people, and democracy is all about popularity. So people were reluctant to take decisions about the masses. And then another aspect which was evident was the lack of legitimacy. President Trump announced that there will be lockdown, and similarly the Indian governments and the Pakistani government, most of the governments announced that there will be lockdowns in their cities and states, but people refuted and rebuked and retaliated, and they said they were infringing on the basic rights. Why? Because the democratic governments do not enjoy that much legitimacy that is supposed to be there. There is no centralization in the form of a democratic government. Why? Because they are the very same leaders who during their political campaigning and election stunts say things that are more popular but are not pragmatic and practical. So people already know that it is all about the politics and gimmicks, and these political leaders have no sanity maybe, and they do not have the right type of concern for the masses. So masses generally avoid them, and that is what I'm talking about legitimacy. Because in democracy, the basic thing is that people submit a part of their sovereignty to the government and pay taxes and pay allegiance, and in return ask the government to do regulatory duties for them to manage the affairs of the state. This is called a social contract theory, which is one of the theories that is a social contract between the masses and their elected representatives. And this is where legitimacy comes in. In Islamic phrase, they call it bay'at, but in Islamic bay'at, it is not like people have to pay taxes essentially, or people are willingly entering into a social contract, but the representative is supposed to be obliged, supposed to be followed, and he is the most competent person. And same is something that is coming out of this all crisis. I have read an article in this online newspaper called The Wire, in which the writer has highlighted this point that epistocracy is rather a more better form of government than democracy. Obviously, we can debate and have discourses on the epistocracy and its efficacy, but by epistocracy we mean that the inclusion of experts in the governmental model. For instance, ministers holding portfolios must have some backgrounds in those portfolios. For instance, somebody is looking after the science and technology, and somebody is looking after the education and health and military and defense. They should have their expertise and background in those fields to better run the affairs of the state, which is a very wise and a good idea. Another drawback of the democracy was that, which is discussed in this article, is that whether everybody has an equal right to vote and everybody has a say in the governmental affairs. For instance, there are so many laymen in the society whom we have seen were very irresponsible during the COVID crisis, and because of them many people have suffered from the corona disease. So are these people equally capable to, are these people equally have the right to have one vote, and they are equally capable to have their say in the governmental affairs? And if somebody does not know anything about the governmental affairs, how can they be allowed to have vote and elect a leader of their own choice? I mean, there is one example that is quoted in this article is about Brexit. I mean, Brexit is a terrible mistake of democracy. Britain had a very shrewd democracy, but the people chose to leave European Union, which was almost kind of a dead end for the British democracy and British bureaucracy, because it cannot be modulated, it cannot be sorted out whether in the form of a hard deal or a soft deal. And that is why for over 1 year, 2 year, the case emerged into a crisis, and still then the Britain is not well settled and easily adjusted in the post-Brexit deals. This is what the Chinese have been talking about, this is what the OECD has been talking about the British democracy. So overall, democracy is not a very favorable form of government, and unfortunately, if at all we have to see further chaos and further disasters and further national calamities of varying degree in the world, democracy cannot handle them. And we've already seen that in most of the countries of the world, democracy is all about exploitation, promoting popular rhetorics and narratives and vendetta and witch hunt, where political parties tussle with each other, and everybody's after their own political interest, and the interests of the state and the interests of the people are secondary, rather lesser than secondary. So I think democracy is not a very viable form of a government, and it is very true that Aristotle has warned the masses to avoid democracy. In fact, he supported a form of government which was called polity, in which only a handful of people were responsible to vote for the government, and they were there to run the affairs of the state. In fact, if you read the theory of philosopher King, he believed that certain kind of people have the right, although there can be many debates around it, but then it is considered to be a model of governance. So what is promoted by Samuel P. Huntington in Clash of Civilization and Francis Fukuyama's liberal democracy to be the final version of the political systems in the world, I think they are very, very mistakenly wrong here. And this COVID crisis is probably a best of social test from where we can evaluate the efficacy of democracy. Thank you.